Australia's cost of living is absolutely crazy in 2025. No one can afford to live, no one can pay rent, food's crazy. The cost of living is absolutely insane. Now this is what everyone seems to say. Online, in my comments, I just hear a lot. People complaining about the cost of living in Australia. But in today's video, I'm going to give my honest thoughts on the cost of living here, take you through what I currently spend in a day at the moment, and show you why I don't think Australia's cost of living is anywhere near as bad as what everyone says online.
Now, Australia, clearly an expensive country, there's no doubt about that. But is it as bad as everyone says? And how does it compare to places like the UK and New Zealand, places where I've lived as well?
For you guys that watch me, you'll know exactly where the first stop of the day is. That is going to be a nice coffee. So everyone come into a local spot to get a coffee. What I'm going to be doing for this is comparing what it's like in Australia, mostly compared to the UK and New Zealand as well, because they're the two spots that I've lived. For example, this coffee cost me $6 today, which I'd say is pretty average for Australia. I would say that's a lot cheaper than the UK and New Zealand. I'll leave on screen about an average that you pay in both of them countries as well, but from my experience, it's a lot cheaper here. And this is a very small example of coffee, but there's lots of things like this which, you know, would be a lot cheaper in Australia from my experience. So finished up a coffee there. One thing, Australian coffee is so much better than anywhere else I've been, and it's cheaper from my experience. But anyway, now I'm gonna get the bus into town, and the best thing about the bus here is it's free. I mean, luckily we do live in the city area in Perth, which means the transport is free, but this isn't the first time in Australia. I think Australian transport is good and it's cheap. It's honestly way cheaper than the UK. New Zealand, it was crazy expensive. Honestly, the amount of cheap train journeys we've got here, little free buses here and there, like, it's pretty cheap in Australia. So yeah, I'm gonna get the bus into town and I'll see you there.
Now, I feel like Perth has pretty decent transport, to be honest. They have Perth, which is basically buses, trains, and even ferries, all for a pretty decent price, to be honest, at least compared to the UK.
One factor that I don't think is spoken about enough when it comes to the cost of living in Australia is the amount of free activities that there is in Australia. I compare this to the UK, where I feel like, especially during the winter time when the weather is terrible, you've got no option really but to spend money if you want to do anything fun. You know, any activities, most of the time you just end up in the pub spending money really. But here in Australia, obviously you've got the beach. I find myself hiking way more. Even just sitting in the park, chilling, little picnic kind of thing. The weather being good, I find I spend way less money because the free activities are good. Do you know what I mean? You can have a very good weekend in Australia and hardly spend any money compared to in the UK, where I feel like when the weather's terrible, and even in Australia when the weather's terrible, there's no real option but to spend money if you want to do anything fun. So I find that having good weather helps the cost of living so much because there is free activities. I feel like it's not spoken about enough when it comes to the cost of living. Yes, everyone, Sushi Hub. Anyway, in the city now, just chilling. Gone to Sushi Hub, which is one of my favourite spots to get food in Australia. Sushi is unbelievable and it is cheap compared to other places, at least. It's not exactly the cheapest choice when it comes to food, but compared to in the UK especially, I feel like a lot of people discover sushi in Australia. It's unbelievable. So that's the selection, guys. 2 rolls and then 2 inaris. These inaris are unbelievable. That selection of sushi there comes to $15, which is about £7, £7.50. I think is very, very well priced. In the UK, you'd be looking at maybe like £12 or something for that amount of sushi. I didn't get it loads in the UK, but when I did, the price definitely shocks me. And I think that's a running theme actually for takeaway food. Food in general, but particularly takeaways, are way cheaper in Australia compared to places like the UK. New Zealand as well is expensive. Australia, again, I think wins here. I was trying to find a good spot to film this, like sit down and talk, but literally I come in the city and all of like the corporate people are on their lunch break, so it's so busy everywhere. So I had to perch myself on a little bench. So the next thing in the spending is rent. Rent in Perth generally I would say is like fairly expensive, but this time we've actually managed to do not too bad. We're paying a lot less than we were last time in Perth. We're paying $400 a week for a room in a share house. It's a pretty nice house. to be honest, with a little balcony. Should be nice in the summer, to be fair. $400 a week, that is, so $200 each, which isn't too bad, I would say, especially when you're getting paid on average for like an average full-time job around $1,000 a week. Only $200 going on rent isn't really that bad, to be honest. So in terms of rent, $200 a week in Australia, people will say that's expensive. I don't think it's that bad, to be honest. Not considering the area that we're in as well, it's pretty nice. So that's how much we pay for rent at the moment. So that is rent. The other common expense obviously is a food shop. I would say on average weekly, I'm spending between $80 and $100 on a food shop. Let me tell you, that was a lot more in New Zealand. I didn't really do a food shop in the UK because I lived at home, but if you do the maths and work out that food shop in Australia, it is around 40 to 50 pounds roughly, which I think for a weekly food shop, dinners, breakfasts, lunches, everything really, I think is pretty reasonable price, to be honest. So by the way, that is at Woolies, which is a typical shop here in Australia. In the UK, it would be a Tesco or a Sainsbury's, something like that, a typical shop. They do actually have Aldi here as well, which would bring the price down even more, but we're not actually shopping there at the moment. But the single most important factor when it comes to Australia's cost of living is the wage you get paid. Honestly, in Australia, they pay so much more on average than they do in places like the UK where the wage is terrible. So to round the video off, that is my honest thoughts on the cost of living at the moment in Australia. Now, from my experience, I have found it not as expensive as other westernized countries that I have been to in the world that I've lived. This isn't me saying that Australia is not an expensive country, because of course Australia is an expensive country. It is expensive, but in my opinion, I don't think it's as bad as what everyone makes out. And I will state, this is from my perspective. I am a backpacker living here in Australia. I don't really have that many expenses. It is just me, my girlfriend that live here, so our expenses aren't particularly high. If you're a family with a mortgage and stuff like that, I'm guessing your expenses are going to be a lot higher, but obviously I can't comment on that. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments on this one. Make sure you give it a like, and I'll see you in the next video.